Yeah, let's go. Ches Aleph.
Okay.
Hey Aleph, sorry.
Where is it? Oh, you're starting over there. Okay, I was in the beginning because we started back to the beginning. Okay. All right. Hey Aleph. I just messed that up. Oh, I think it was over here. Okay. Okay. Hey Aleph. They interrogate them with 7 questions in which seven questions in which septenary, in which year, in which month, in which day of the month, on which day, in which hour, in which place. Rav Yoshi says, on which day, in which hour, in which place. Did you recognize him? Did you warn him? In the case of an idolater, they ask, what did he worship and how did he worship it? Whoever expands the interrogations is praiseworthy. It has once happened that Ben Zakkai interrogated concerning the stems of figs. What difference is there between examinations and interrogations? In the case of examinations, if one says, I do not know, their testimony is null. In the case of interrogations, if one says, I do not know, even if, I'm sorry, or even if two say, we do not know, their testimony is upheld. Whether in the case of examinations or in the case of interrogations, if they contradict each other, their testimony is null. If one says it happened on the 2nd day of the month and one says it happened on the 3rd day of the month, the testimony is upheld. Because this one is aware of the entire calculation of the month, and this one is not aware of the intercalation of the intercalation. I don't know. If one says it happened on the 3rd and the one says it happened on the 5th, the testimony is no. If one says it happened on the 2nd hour of the day and one says it happened on the 3rd hour of the day, the testimony is upheld. If one said it happened in the 3rd hour and the one says the 5th, the testimony is no. Rabbi Yehuda says it is upheld. But if one says it happened in the 5th hour and one says it happened in the 7th, the testimony is no, because in the 5th hour the sun is to the east, while the 7th hour it is to the west. Okay.
Hey. All right. So we just investigated interrogated the first witness. Now Mishna Dalet so they bring the second guy in and go through all the same procedures with him. Okay, so if there are any contradictions between their testimony, we don't need to talk about that further because the case gets dismissed. Okay, but if their words corroborate each other, then the first thing that they start with is an argument in mitigation. Now, what's that argument in mitigation? Is so they start discussing it. The Gemara says that that what do they say to him? If they say to the accused, if you didn't actually do this thing that they're accusing you of, don't worry, you don't have to worry, it'll be okay. That's the minimum that they can do to start arguing in the positive. Amar echad min ha'edim. So if one of the witnesses came and said, "Yesh li lelamed alav zchus," look, even though I testified against him, I can teach something that will be in his favor. Or echad min talmidim, or if one of the talmidim, in other words, remember there was the Sanhedrin was the semicircle, and then we had 3 rows of students in front of them. So that's the students. So if one of the students says, "I've got an argument against him," they tell him to keep quiet. This is not your place to talk. The Talmidim are not allowed to argue for conviction, and the witnesses, having given their edus to convict him, they're not allowed to change now, because he's given his testimony. He can't now come and change his tune. Amar echad min talmidim yesh li lelamed alav zchus. Says, I've got an argument that could save him. So they take this Talmud and they stick him in the semicircle with the Sanhedrin. Okay, and for that whole day of arguments, he stays in pride of place. Okay, for having come up with an argument. Okay. And if he's got, and that was even if he was bringing up a narishkeit, but just because he was trying to argue lischus, they still honor him. But if he's got a real argument, then they listen to him. And what happens if even the accused himself wants to give an argument in his own favor? Shomin lo, ובלבד שיש ממש בדבריו. Then they'll listen to him only if he's got substance to his words.
Hi, Shmuley. I got your.
Okay. If they found favorable arguments for him, then they dismissed him, and on that day, I said, okay, you're not guilty. Cheers. But if they don't find arguments in his favor, then they have to push it off until the next day. So they would divide up into small groups. Lavdavka pairs. It says over here they should divide up into pairs. Doesn't necessarily have to be two, but we're talking about small groups so that they can sit and discuss the case. And this is a very serious thing because we're dealing with a capital case. And so they reduce the amount of food that they eat, and they wouldn't drink wine all that day. And they would discuss the matter at night as well. So then they come back to the Beis Din. So somebody who previously argued in favor of acquittal says, and I still maintain my position in favor of acquittal. And I maintain my position that he's guilty. Somebody is allowed to reverse his position from conviction to acquittal. Once he's voted already in favor of acquittal, we don't allow him to switch back to switch to conviction. If they forgot some of the arguments that were mentioned the previous day, that's why you've got the stenographers to remind you of what was argued yesterday and to pick up the discussion again. And if they found, in other words, they voted in favor of acquittal, then they acquitted him straight away. So then, if they couldn't find the argument if they couldn't find any arguments to acquit him, then they would take a vote. So if you have a majority of one voting to acquit, he's acquitted. If you have a majority of one that's voting to convict, then that's not enough. You can't have a majority of one. But if you do and if you have an equal amount and one says or even if you've got 22 of them, all voting to acquit, or 22 all voting to convict, and one of them says, I don't know. Then they have to add dayanim, because the one who abstains from voting is ki'ilu, he's not there, and you can't make a judgment without having somebody actually cast a vote. Ad kama mosipin. So how many do they add? Shnaim. So you add two judges at a time. So you introduce two more judges to the case, so that you've got now 25 in the case. And if you have now a vote of even if the guy who says I don't know still says I don't know, at least you've got 23 people who are voting. You've got 24 people who are voting. So then you need that majority of one to acquit, or majority of two to convict, and then you can move forward. But if you still don't have 23 people voting, or a clear majority, or if you've just got a majority of one to convict, then you still have to keep adding on two judges at a time, even until you reach 71. 71, we draw the line. I don't know if that would ever happen, but theoretically, if it had to get up to 71, then they'd say stop. Okay. So now we're at 71. So if you got 36 saying acquit and 35 saying convict, zakai. Okay, we release him. And now you're at 71, and you still only got a majority of one to convict. Danin elu keneged elu. They carry on arguing until one of the people who was saying chayav admits the case of the mazakin. Now they only mention that over here because the Mishnah has the inclination to want to acquit, but it's not stated that, but it's also true that if at this point, even though we said earlier that somebody who voted for acquittal cannot change his position, but once we're in a deadlock like this, where you can't add more judges and you've got a majority of one saying to convict, then we will allow one who said to acquit to switch over to the other side. Otherwise, what's the point of having the argument? You'll never be able to convict anyway. So
even though before we said that if someone's on conviction, he can't change over to acquittal.
The other way, he can't change from acquittal to conviction.
Right.
But once they reach this limit over here of where we're not going to be able to add more judges to decide the case, then that's the one case where we do allow a judge to switch from acquittal to conviction.
Okay.
Otherwise, it would have been a meaningless exercise, because why are you bothering to argue? Okay. Perik Vav. Nigmar Hadin. Okay, so he has been sentenced to death. Okay, Motzian also lesokla. So they take him out to stone him, and they mention skilla here not because it's because there are 4 death penalties, but skilla is the first one that's mentioned. Skilla, streifa, herig, v'chenek. Okay, so they take him out to the place where he's going to be stoned. The execution place is Beis Skilla hayachutz lebeis din. It was outside the Beis Din at a fair distance, and they deliberately put it at a distance because they wanted to give an amount of time for refuting witnesses to come through. Okay, so they take out that was the case of the Mekalel. He was taken out and taken to the place of execution. Echad omed al Pesach Beis Din v'sudarin biyado. Then one guy stays at the Beis Din door, and he's got flags, because if anyone comes with anything, he's going to signal to the people to prevent the execution. Okay, and another guy is riding a horse far from him, and they keep eye contact between the guy standing at the entrance of the Beis Din and the guy in the horse. So somebody comes to the guy at the Beis Din and says, "Listen, I've got an argument in favor of him." He waves the flags, and the horse rushes back and brings umamido is referring to. So they come back to the Beis Din and they discuss this new point. And if there's substance to these words, then they come and discuss it again. I feel even if the guy who's been convicted comes and argues, I've got an argument in favor of my own acquittal. Then they bring him back. He could be using it as a stalling tactic, but they still bring him back and say, "Okay, let's hear what you've got to say." But only if he's got some substance to his words. And they can still vote to acquit him again if they find some new information that changes their minds. But if not, then they take him back to the execution square. And a crier goes out in front of him. Ish ploni ben ploni, yotzeli sakel. So this poor guy is going out to be stoned. Al she'avar avera plonis, because he did the following avera. Ploni edav, and his witnesses are so and so and so and so. Kol mi sheyodeh lo zechus yavo v'yilamed alav. And anyone who knows anything about this case, who can come and save him, come and teach. And why do they have to do this? They have to say who the witnesses are, because we're looking to see to if we can find Eidei Hazama, to say, what do you mean these witnesses testified against him on this day? They were with us. Give them a time to come to the base and say, we know these witnesses. They were with us at the time. Okay, and that way they have the possibility of finding Eidim Zomimim.
And again, the court always tries to hold off from any kind of execution as much as they can.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of stretch the
yes. The execution is meant to happen immediately after the judgment. There's no death row while you sit waiting for whatever. It's a bo bayom. It's that on that day they have to carry out the sentence, but they can stretch it out a little bit in order to get the Adim to come and to get any potential Adim to come and contradict the other Adim. Okay, back to Aleph Daled.
Okay, I just need 10 seconds. I have a technician supposed to come, and I got a message from him, so I don't know what it said. Capital cases are judged by 23. The animal which commits an act of bestiality or is a recipient is judged by 23, as it says, and you shall kill the woman and the animal. And it says, and the animal you shall kill. An axe which is to be stoned is judged by 23, as it says, the axe shall be stoned, and also its owner shall be put to death. In the same manner as the owner is put to death, the axe is put to death. The ox is put to death. The wolf, the lion, the bear, the leopard, the bardeleth, and the snake are sentenced to death by 23. Rabbi Eliezer says, whoever is first to kill them acquires merit, and Rabbi Akiva says their death is by 23. A tribe, a false prophet, and a Kohen Gadol may not be judged except before the court of 71. A discretionary war may not be waged without the approval of the court of 71. In addition to the city, in addition to the court orders may be made only with the court of 71. Sanhedrins for the tribes may be appointed only by the court of 71. An apostate town can be so designated only by the court of 71. They cannot designate an apostate town on the border, nor 3, but they may so designate 1 or 2. The great Sanhedrin was composed of 71 judges and a lesser one of 23. From where do we know that the great one was 71? Because it says, gather to me 70 men from the leaders of Israel, and Moses presided over them. Hence, 71. Rabbi Yehuda said 70. And from what do we know? That a lesser one is comprised of 23, because it says, and the congregation shall judge, and the congregation shall save. A congregation with judges and a congregation with saves, we thus arrive at 20. And from where do we know that a congregation consists of 10? Because it says, until when this evil congregation, which includes Yeshua and Caleb.
Which not excludes.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, which excludes Yeshua and Caleb. And from where do we know to include another 3? From the implication of that which says, do not follow a majority to convict. I may infer that I should follow them to exonerate. If so, why does it say according to the majority of the matter shall be decided? This teaches us that the decision to convict is unlike the decision to exonerate. The decision to exonerate turns on the vote of 1, while the decision to convict must return on the vote of 2. But since no court may desist of an even number, we must add another for a total of 23. And how many must be in the town to warrant the Sanhedrin? 120. When the comment says 230, corresponding to the officers of the tens.
Okay.
Okay.
Next,
right.
Bava Matzia, last Mishna.
Okay. Okay. Good job. If there were 2 gardens, one above the other, with vegetables between them, Reb Meir says they belong to the upper one. Reb Yehuda says they belong to the lower one. And Reb Meir says if the upper one should decide to remove his earth, there would be no vegetables. Said Reb Yehuda, if the lower one should decide to fill up his garden, there would be no vegetables. Said Reb Meir, since both of them can stop one another, we should see from where these vegetables sustain themselves. Said Reb Shimon, wherever the upper one can stretch out his hand and take into his, and the remainder belongs to the lower one.
Okay, Baba Basra.
Okay. They're doing the first one? Yes?
Yep, beginning of Baba Basra.
Partners who agree to the protection of a courtyard build the wall in the middle. Whenever they are accustomed to build with untrimmed stones or hewn stones, or half bricks or bricks, they build all in accordance with the custom of the province. For untrimmed stones, each one provides 3 tefachim for used stones. Each one provides 2.5 tefachim for half bricks. Each one provides 2 tefachim for bricks. Each one provides 1.5 tefachim. Therefore, the wall fell. The place and the stones belong to both of them. Okay. Similarly, a garden is treated generally as a place where they were accustomed to fence off, and we are obligated to do so. However, a valley is treated generally as a place where they were accustomed to not to fence off, and we do not obligate him to do so. Rather, if he desires, he should withdraw into his own field, build a fence, and make a mark on the outside. Therefore, if the wall fell, the space and the stones belong to him. If they made it by common consent, they build the wall in the middle and make marks on both sides. Therefore, if the wall fell, the place and the stones belong to both of them.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
On to Gittin. Gittin is hay bait. Payment may not be taken from assigned property. If there was unassigned property available, even if they are of the poorest quality, payment from the property of orphans may be taken only from fields of the poorest quality. Payment may be not collected or the consumption of produce or for the improvement of the property or for the support of the wives and daughters from assigned property for the sake of the general good. One who finds a lost article need not swear for the sake of the general good. Orphans who relied upon a householder or their father appointed an administrator for them, he is obligated to tithe the produce. An administrator appointed by the orphan's father must swear. If an appointed by the court, he need not swear. Abba Shul says the reverse is true. And one who ritually contaminates another's food, or one who mixes it with truma, or one who offers another's wine as a libation for idol worship, if he did it inadvertently, he is not liable. If deliberately, he is liable. Kohanim who deliberately rendered an offering in the sanctuary pigul are liable.
Okay. Sukkah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Gimel Aleph. A stolen lulav or a dry one.
Hold on, no, we're in base sign. Am I wrong?
It might
No,
be.
you're right. Sorry, Sukkah Gimel Aleph. I beg your pardon.
A stolen lulav or a dry one is invalid, and one from an asherah or from a city that was led astray is invalid. If its top was broken off or its leaves were severed, it's invalid. And if its leaves spread apart, it is valid. But Yehuda says you tied them together at the top. The thorn palms of the iron mountain are valid, and a lulav that is 3 tefachim long and long enough to wave is valid. A stolen myrtle twig or a dry one is invalid, and one from an asherah or from a city that was led astray is invalid. If its top was broken off, or its leaves were severed, or its berries outnumbered its leaves, it is invalid. If it decreased them, it is valid, but we did not decrease them on Yom Tov. A small stolen willow twig, or a dry one is invalid, and one from an asherah or from the city that was led astray is invalid. If its top was broken off, or its leaves were severed, or
is a mountain willow.
It is invalid. One whose leaves are wilted, or part of its leaves have fallen off, or one from a field is valid. Okay.
Brachas Gimel Hay.
Someone was standing, engaged in the tefillah, and remembered that he was about carry. He does not, on that account, stop altogether. Instead, he shortens. If he descended to immerse himself and is able to come up and cover himself and to read before the sun rises, he shall come up dressed and read. And if not, he shall cover himself with the water and read. But he may not cover himself in evil-smelling water, or in water is soaking until he pours in water. How far away? One should remove himself from it and from an excrement 4 amos. Azava became a bakari with a menstruant who discharged semen, and a woman who is engaged in relations and notices herself menstruating requires immersion. Rabbi Yehuda exempts. And the tefillah of the morning until noon, Rabbi Yehuda says till 4 hours of the day. The mincha of tefillah until the evening, and Rabbi Yehuda says until midday through the mincha. The evening tefillah is not fixed, and on the musaf all day, Rabbi Yehuda says until the 7th hour.
Okay. And Tamid Base Hay.
Yes. They selected from their fine wool of a fig tree to arrange a second pyre for the incense opposite the southwest corner, drawn 4 amos northward from the corner, an estimated 5 saw of coal, and on the Sabbath, an estimated 8 saws of coal. But they would place the spoonfuls of frankincense of the showbread, the limbs and the fats that were not consumed during the night. The Kohanim returned them to the pyre, and they kindled the 2 pyres with fire, and the Kohanim descended and came to the chamber of the Yudin stone. The appointed one said to them, "Come and cast lots. Who slaughters a Talmud offering? One who throws its blood, one who clears ash from the inner altar, and one who clears the ash from the menorah. One who brings the limbs of the Talmud up onto the ramp of the altar. the head and the right hind leg, the two forelegs, the fat of the tail and the left hind leg, the fat of the chest and neck, the two flanks, the intestines and the fine flour, and the chavitim and the wine. They cast lots, and the one who won. The appointed one said to them, "Go out and see if the time was for slaughtering has arrived." And if the time has arrived, the observer says, "Dawn." Masa ben Shmuel says the entire eastern sky is lit up. And as for Hebron, the observer says, "Yes."
Okay. And we are done.
Okay, great. What's